4,500 years ago, while pharaohs were building pyramids in Egypt and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia were rising from the plains, another civilization was thriving, a colossal empire, larger than both of its contemporaries combined, home to millions. They built the world's first planned cities, with grid-like streets, sophisticated sanitation, and bustling trade. They were pioneers of precision, masters of water, and architects of a society that for 1,000 years knew a profound and mysterious peace. This was the Indus Valley Civilization. And then, in one of history's most baffling vanishing acts, they were gone. Their cities emptied, their language was forgotten, and their story was buried under a shroud of dust and silence. There were no signs of a final cataclysmic war, no texts left behind to tell of their downfall. So what killed this extraordinary civilization? How does a society of 5 million people simply disappear? The story of the Indus Valley Civilization, or the Harappan Civilization as it's also known, only re-emerged from history in the 1920s. Archaeologists excavating in British India stumbled upon the remains of a city so vast and so ancient it completely rewrote the textbooks. What they uncovered was astonishing. Not just one city, but a network of over 1,000 settlements dominated by the metropolises of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. These were not primitive villages. This was urban planning on a scale unseen anywhere else in the Bronze Age. What's remarkable about the Indus cities is the standardization. The bricks, for instance, are a uniform size across hundreds of miles. Their weights and measures are standardized. This speaks to a highly organized, centralized authority. But curiously, we find no opulent palaces, no grand royal tombs, no monumental statues of kings. It's a puzzle. It suggests a different kind of power structure, perhaps one based on trade or religious ideology rather than dynastic rule. Their engineering was revolutionary. Nearly every house in Mohenjo-Daro had access to a well and was connected to a city-wide drainage system, a feat of sanitation that London wouldn't achieve for another 4,000 years. But their greatest mystery, the key to unlocking their world, remains tantalizingly out of reach: their script. Found on thousands of tiny stone seals, these symbols are the only written legacy of the Indus people. But no one can read them. Without a Rosetta Stone to provide a translation, their thoughts, their beliefs, and the story of their demise remain locked away. This silence has forced archaeologists to become detectives, hunting for clues in the earth itself. For decades, the leading theory for the collapse was simple and brutal: invasion. The first excavator of Mohenjo-Daro, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, discovered several unburied skeletons in the upper layers of the city. He theorized they were the victims of a violent massacre by Aryan invaders sweeping in from the north. It was a compelling story that held sway for years. But modern archaeology has revealed a different truth. Dr. Anika Sharma: when we re-examined those skeletons with modern forensic techniques, the massacre theory fell apart. There are no signs of weapon injuries on most of them. In fact, many show signs of disease, like malaria or cholera. It wasn't a slaughterhouse. It was a city in decline, struggling with sickness. The invasion theory is now almost completely discounted. If not by the sword, how did this civilization die? The new front line of the investigation is not in the ruins, but in the landscape itself. Scientists now believe the Indus people weren't defeated by an enemy army, but by a far more powerful force: nature.
Dr. Kenji Tanaka, paleoclimatologist.
The Indus civilization was a gift of the river, specifically the mighty Ghaggar Hakra, which many believe was the mythical Saraswati River. It was a snow-fed perennial river that allowed for predictable, bountiful agriculture, but our geological surveys and satellite data show that around 1900 BCE, tectonic shifts diverted the river's water source. The Ghaggar Hakra began to dry up.
The lifeblood of the empire was choked off. But this was only one part of a devastating climate catastrophe. At the same time the rivers were failing, the heavens fell silent. Evidence drilled from deep within caves and lake beds across Asia reveals a stark truth. For centuries, the Indus people had relied on the powerful summer monsoons. But around 4,200 years ago, these monsoons dramatically weakened, becoming erratic and unreliable for nearly 2 centuries.
It was a perfect storm. Your primary river is dying, and the seasonal rains you rely on for supplementary agriculture are failing. For a civilization built entirely on agricultural surplus, it's a death sentence. It wouldn't have been a sudden apocalypse, but a slow, grinding decline. Year after year of failed crops, shrinking granaries, and growing desperation.
The collapse of the Indus Valley was not an event, but a process. It was a slow unraveling. Faced with drought and famine, the people did the only thing they could. They left. Archaeological evidence shows a mass migration away from the old urban centres and towards smaller, more sustainable rural settlements in the east, towards the Gangetic Plains. The great cities with their intricate systems could no longer be supported. The population dispersed, and with them the unified culture of the Indus Valley fragmented and faded away. Dr. Anika Sharma. You see it in the pottery. The highly standardized, beautiful Harappan pottery gets replaced by cruder, regional styles. The society de-urbanized. The writing disappeared, because the complex trade and administration it supported was gone. They didn't die out, they adapted. But in adapting, their great civilization was lost. But is it truly lost? Some scholars believe the ghost of the Indus lives on, woven into the fabric of modern India. The reverence for water, seen in the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, echoes in Hindu ritual bathing. Motifs from Indus seals, like the seated yogic figure, bear a striking resemblance to later depictions. The first great civilization of South Asia may have set the cultural foundations for all that followed. The story of the Indus Valley is a profound and humbling cautionary tale. They were not destroyed by greed or war, but by a climate they could not control. They were a civilization that achieved a remarkable balance with their world, until that world changed beneath their feet. Their undeciphered script leaves us with a haunting silence. We may never know the names of their leaders or the words of their poets, but their magnificent empty cities speak for them. They are a timeless warning, written in brick and dust, of how even the mightiest of empires are ultimately at the mercy of the planet they call home.